Hi, and welcome to the podcast, which I shouldn't be doing because it's Wednesday and it's a very weird midweek holiday. I know that we just had one 2 weeks ago, but not everybody is off for Juneteenth. This is one of the bigger holidays. It's secular, it's non-denominational. Everybody does something. Most people do something for 4th of July, and it's got to be weird. If is this the week you take vacation and travel, maybe knowing travel's going to be nuts and crazy, so many people will be back out on the road and in the air. Hey, great opportunity to listen to a podcast you like. Lots of travel, or do you have off? Like our office closed an hour ago. We closed at like 2 o'clock here today, and we're off tomorrow. I'm sure some places closed Friday. We're not closed Friday. So what do? Do you take the whole week off? Do you take? It's very confusing, and you have my sympathy trying to navigate this super weird week. Maybe you're not off, if at all, or maybe just for a couple of hours on the 4th. This is messy. So you have my sympathies with that. A couple of serious things. My favorite podcast, other than I like this podcast more than my own. A theory of mine, this podcaster, this writer, sussed out with an expert on something that you and many people love, which is killers. And a couple of, actually, we'll do the local things before we get to that. Let me state this first. I am not going to name the place. I am not trying to drag them through the mud, simply because, well, a couple of reasons. One is because I frequent the place. It's one local business where I can frequently throw a lot of my money. Also, the matter has been resolved. I just wanted to use this as an example of something you may have heard me say before. Maybe in recent podcasts. I feel like it came up not that long ago. When I moved here, I felt I was able to finally relate to my friends, which is just about all of them. I have so few like white male straight friends, which is, I think, a good thing. Diversity, right? I finally was able to relate to so many of my friends who not have been mistreated, but people are not used to having them in their circles or whatever it may be. Maybe you didn't grow up in a diverse community. And not that there's any kind of hate or anything like that. But as you might have heard me say before, when people find out that I'm Jewish, it's like there have been many times where it's like they're encountering an alien. It's like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Like they get all wide-eyed. I have definitely heard, I've never met one before. And they don't say it in a derogatory way like I'm some kind of pet. Like, I've never seen a boa constrictor or a king cobra before. It's not like that. It's just, I've never tried squid before. It's just so different. And in a lot of cases, there's not hate because people who like me a lot and didn't know this, they're not instantly they didn't hate me. They're not going to hate me because I'm Jewish. You just don't run into many around here. There's like 2,200 Jewish people that might just be, I think that's the Toledo area. And remember, this is a metro. Toledo is, 270,000 people? The metro has 500,000 people, or a little bit less than that. So that is a minute percentage. It's probably 0.00 something. It's a tiny percentage. As I've said before, this is the least diverse place I've ever lived. It is extremely black and white, not figuratively speaking. We've got white people, we've got black people, and there's a smattering of Hispanic people, a smattering of Asian people, of different ethnicities. And we've talked about this before. Bigger cities pull more ethnic people. When people have come over to this country, when our ancestors did, or 50 years ago, 100 years ago, many of them went to big cities. And while we're a city, we're not a real big one. So I'm not chalking this up to hatred, although, as a friend said, hatred or straight out anti-Semitism, because as much as anti-Semitism is on the rise, and I'm pretty certain there's statistics that say that most hate crimes are committed against Jewish people, but I'll leave that statistic alone since I don't remember the commercial that I saw that on real well. I want to believe that this was not straight up anti-Semitism. And again, I'm going to leave the who, what, when, and not the when, but the who and what alone. And I think this is more in line with the, I've never met one before. Now, there is one part of it that bothers me, a lack of awareness of what's going on. And as we learned a couple of weeks ago with the sonic boom, not everybody knows what's happening in the world. I get it, especially maybe younger people of all ages, from 15 to 18 to 28. So I went a place the other day, and there was a sign, I don't know what the rest of it said, but it said hanging Jew or hanging Jews. I surmised, and I think correctly, it was a type of plant or flower. Now, I know that's going to narrow down where I could be talking about, but I'll leave it at that. It said hanging Jew. I was like, well, and it was busy, and I did not want to be so obvious as to take the picture. I'm like, let me just let it go. Also because I didn't want to create a ruckus in a place I really like. Now, maybe you're thinking, Eric, you have a platform to initiate change. It's kind of within your DNA to actually make a tactful, strategic ruckus. I thought about this a lot. I texted some friends, some Jewish friends and some non-Jewish friends to get their vibe on things. Other friends who have not dealt with anti-Semitism, but racism, homophobia, those kinds of things. And I'm not done processing all of this. So I sent, and I looked it up, and it is some kind of plant. Apparently, I think it's actually wandering Jew, and we've retired that, like we've retired correctly. So like the R word and other things. Like I was not familiar with this phrase at all. Now, granted, I'm no plant person. I know a plant person I can ask. 2 people. It said hanging Jew. Apparently, it should have been wandering Jew, and it looks like that phrase is actually transitioned over to wandering dude. Maybe the wandering Jew had something to do with the story of Passover when the Israelites left Egypt and were in the desert before for whatever it was, 40 days, 40 years, wandering to get to the Holy Land. So I sent a message to this business saying, let me pull it up so I get it right. I want to do my best to get my words right. Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. Hey, there was a sign near the mountain that said hanging Jew. I'm assuming it was a plant of some kind. Then I explained even that's been modified. Definitely not hanging, though. Thanks. And I got the automated response. They saw it, and that was, and that was the last I heard of it. I went back to this place, and it was down. Something about like plants otherwise, but the hanging Jew part was 100% down. I would have liked a response. And again, I think it's you don't know what you don't know. Ignorance, especially when there's so little in the area to know of our minute percentage of people in the population here. Can overlook that. Yeah, the part I can't quite get over is there has been a pretty ferocious, violent situation happening that is in news multiple times per week. There could be all kinds of horrific, mind-numbing, unbelievable atrocities to different degrees, and I'm not going to dive into that. But everybody knows what's happening over, like, between Israel and Gaza. Maybe everybody doesn't know what's happening. I'm thinking there was a lack of awareness. But can you have a whole store of people? I don't know how many employees there were. 20, 30. Nobody said, hey, Jew, those 2 words don't, I don't know what that is, but maybe we should pull that down considering the strong opinions about the situation in the Middle East right now. Like nobody watched the news and said, we need to pull that down. And I'm wondering, and your input is welcome, if I need to follow up and have my friends at the Jewish Federation reach out to this place and go, yo, what's up? Let them investigate whether or not there was some hidden anti-Semitism at play, or just a place full of completely ignorant to the world people. The other serious thing, I briefly saw a commercial last night, and it talked about getting outside. And I'm going to try to make this fast because I'm going to do some other things. I'll keep it under 30 minutes. Unless you have a long ride, I can do 3 hours. I saw a commercial last night, and it talked about, maybe it didn't even say this, but what I took from it was, put your phone down, get outside. And I had this epiphany, this light bulb moment. And it goes back to the theory that, I've thrown around a bunch of times, and I'm not going to rehash it, but the world went to shit when Facebook got rid of the timeline and chronological feed. And it went to whoever can get the most attention, aka engagement. So isolation, we know that isolation of people is up, of all ages. Screen time, and these two go hand in hand, is up. I was going to put combativeness is also up, but that is not maybe the fundamental thing here. Isolation up, screen time up, effective communication down, I would say. So about my theory. Today I gave it the name where I wrote down the BuzzFeedification or the clickbaitification of life. Everybody trying to get attention. You would have regularly reserved people feeling a compulsion to say things or post things they never otherwise would. Like, they might not post anything at all, but they feel compelled to justify having these accounts. So they throw their sense, their voice out into the ether. There are genuinely nice, decent human beings who get caught up in internet arguments with complete random strangers. There's keyboard courage. And I think to different degrees, we're all guilty of three of those in a lot of ways. You've heard me say, if I didn't do what I did, I would severely cut back on my social. But I need to keep my engagement up in a lot of ways. I'm able to reach people and do more good through social than I am through still a big platform of radio. And I can't do stuff like this on the radio. That's why we save it for the podcast. So add to the things above. Isolation is up. Screen time is up. Effective communication is down. And those things have rewritten our DNA, and we have essentially taken our offline behavior into real life. That's why everything is at a fever pitch, on a hair trigger. I made the analogy as I was writing this up. Things have always been a powder keg, playground fights, adults bickering on Black Friday, stuff like that. But it's like 100 times worse now, because those of us that feel the need to inject our voices to, again, we feel compelled to justify these accounts, even if we have 78 followers. Or I'm so used to arguing with people on the internet, even though I was never doing that before, and I would never do that in public. Well, that's now taken over me. And we take our negative offline behavior like that, and we take it into the real world. And that's why we have so much combativeness, so much angst, so much acrimony. Before, maybe we could talk ourselves down, talk to one another, walk away from the situation. But we've, again, taken that offline behavior into real life. And that's another reason why we are where we are. That powder keg has become like a fusion bomb, and it wants to go off all the time, and too often it does. It is a very tense, ferocious world right now. I had another theory. Actually, let me do the local things, and then we'll talk about serial killers. The Blade contacted me because a friend of mine has come back to the area. Her name is Sophia Periconi. She is now back to anchoring part-time and doing reporting for WTOL. The name is a little familiar. She did reporting for NBC 24 from 2019 to 2021. I met her at a Black Lives Rally Matter in Ottawa Hills in spring of 2020, so 4 years ago. And I had followed her online because I do my best to follow all the local journalists so I can see what stories they're doing and send it your way. I wish more of them were on Twitter because it's the best and easiest place for me to access information and things going on quickly. I understand why they're not on there anymore, especially as the journalists get younger and younger. I think this is where I learned that this was her first job out of school. You can read this story in the Blade today. I'll share it a couple of different places, but she's back. And she had mentioned to me over the last year or so that she had wanted to come back. I'm like, really? She's from out west. She left here to go to Vegas. And then I think she went to New York for some things where she originally had gone to school. I was stunned because her skill, talent, poise, and the gravitas with what she did blew me away. I thought this would have been like her third or fourth job, and only so many because she kept getting bumped up. It was hard to believe that this was her first job, and you'd never guess it. Like, she had big network type of presentation and delivery. So I'm really glad that she is back here. Another local story, Brandon Hawkins. Staying with the Walleye for a fourth year, putting up tons of goals. He is an opposing goalie's worst nightmare. He is burning out the backs of nets that those goalies are trying to protect. I think this is his fourth year. He was the ECHL MVP. Plenty of his teammates, as is common with the ECHL, went over to Europe. I didn't know. The pay is a little better, but I didn't know that's tax-free money. So there's going to be a lot of new Walleye faces next year, as there often is. He decided to stay. Let me give you the quote. Hawkins turned down offers from higher level AHL teams during the Walleye regular season. That surprises me because that's a big deal. That's one step from the NHL. In all honesty, and here's where he got me, I'm such a homebody. That's the best way I can explain it. I love the fact that my family gets to come to every game. My wife's family is from Cleveland, so having family close to me is more valuable than any money that can be thrown at me going to Europe. The homebody got me. And I'd love to see a player from the Walleye maybe make it to the NHL or star in the AHL. But he reminds me of, you remember Mike Hessman? He was with the brief time in the major leagues, spent a lot of time with the Mud Hens. He might be the all-time International League home run leader. Maybe that name, maybe those stats, those accomplishments begin to ring a bell. Mike Hessman, super tall guy. And I don't know how long ago he retired, but he stayed with the Tigers organization. I think a little bit with the Tigers, a little bit with the Mud Hens in coaching capacities. And he is a Mud Hens legend, an International League legend. Now, it's both good and bad that you can set minor league records. It means you're good, but not good enough to get to the next level, to the highest level, so you stay at this one forever. But accomplishments, achievements, they are what they are. Good for him. There's plenty of people that would kill to be the home run king of minor league baseball. And I wonder if that's going to be, if Brandon Hawkins will be the Walleye version of Mike Hessman. Last thing, podcast I like so much, I haven't talked about on the show in a while, Derek Thompson's In Plain English. His podcast was like 45 minutes. I have to break this down into like under 5 or 7. Somebody asked him what shows he likes, what kind of movies. He said Silence of the Lambs, 7 movies that I like the sociopathic serial killer kind. In fact, when I was listening to the podcast, I was like, oh, I got to tweet him again. He's got to watch Mindhunter, the beginning of forensic psychology, trying to figure all this out. So he got a guest who is like a serial killer expert. And my longtime theory has been we have had eras of fearful scourges, of terrifying scourges. There was, when my dad grew up, the 50s and 60s, the nuclear era. My dad had to get under his desk at school in case a nuclear bomb happened. Nuclear war, we were on the precipice. Then the 70s and 80s, and I guess early 90s came along, and what scared people? Serial killers. Ted Bundy. Was he the clown killer guy? The Zodiac one. There was, I'm forgetting all the names now. I remember mostly Jeffrey Dahmer. That was like late 80s, early 90s. We were in the serial killer era, and I'm sure there were plenty of people, especially like in New York or Long Island, who thought if they went outside, they would be preyed upon by a serial killer. After the serial killer era, I think we moved into late 90s, early 2000s. Obviously, international terrorism. Remember, before 9/11, there was a bombing before that, I think in the mid-90s. And then we've moved away from that because I think we have probably done a good job internationally in wiping out Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all that. We've moved into the school shooter era. And one of the things that Derek, the host, and the guest, who was like a serial killer expert, pointed out that a lot of these things come from the contagion aspect of things. You see a serial killer on TV, your mind's a lot broken, you want to be a serial killer. Same thing. So many copycats. That's why we have these school shootings. And as they pointed out on the episode today, there's actually been knock on wood, thankfully, there's been very, very few of them this year. And I think they said the guest said that they have been dwindling, which is phenomenal. And it's probably for a variety of reasons. So why serial killers? And it was fascinating to hear the guest point out, well, in the 60s and 70s, there was a sexual revolution. So you just wanted to, I guess, fuck everybody. So you had a lot of sexual deviance that was born out of people. You had a lot of trusting hitchhikers. You had a lot of hitchhiking. So people got in the car with strangers. That's why it was funny when Uber really blew up. A lot of us were like, we were told never to get in the car with strangers because of this. They also pointed out that in the 70s and early 80s, homicide was up. We talked about this a bunch, how even when crime was at historic levels or scary levels during the COVID era, I think it was still lower than what was going on, especially in big cities like New York City in the 80s. It was homicide mania, the crack epidemic and everything. Prostitution, I believe, was on the rise in a lot of ways. And serial killers saw prey, and they pointed out how the good ones didn't get caught because they were so normal. It was he'd never do that. The ones that were a little weird and maybe bad at covering their tracks got caught, so they never turned into serial killers. And I guess some definitions were changed from originally 4 killings to 3 to 2. So think about that. You kill 2 people and you're not caught, you're a serial killer. That's why I've always, like, that sounds frightening. Like, you would think a serial killer, you'd go, oh, probably has like 11 or 15 bodies on their name. That's why it always bothered me that when we talk about like mass shooting, like when I think of mass, it's a way bigger number than we use now to define mass shooting. I know as morbid as that sounds, it's an honest feeling. And thankfully, more people are not killed in mass shootings. Like I think of like, oh my God, 23 bodies dead, 43 people dead in a mass shooting. Oh, it's 6. Eric, you're making light of 6 people dead. I'm making light of the math that it's 6 and not 26 or 36. Why, the short version, why did serial killers go away? Forensic psychology, we got better evidence. DNA, it was easier to track these people, or else we would have had a lot more serial killers. They also talked about the rise of porn. People who could have potentially been sexual deviants, whether they preyed on kids or women or what Dahmer did, they could get off watching porn because it was so easily accessible. The one last thing that I think all of us know to bring it into the contemporary era is not you, because you're here. People think the world is so much worse than it actually is. And we've come so far in healthcare and hunger, and homelessness is a big deal recently, but we have really slammed down a lot of things that have plagued our history. Now, other problems have risen up, and hopefully, science and technology and math and smart decisions can save those. But what forensic psychology, evidence, all those things. Another reason why he believed, the expert believed crime has come down in a lot of ways, killings, is because everybody's filming everything. And I've said this before, like you're really dumb and or desperate, 2 Ds, if you want to commit a robbery. Like there's cameras everywhere. You're going to get caught in all likelihood. And I get it. There's desperation and you don't care and you're not afraid of going to prison for a variety of reasons. Maybe your home life has been a prison your whole life. So you take going to jail and you'll take the risk. But everything is being filmed. Last thing, I remember when I was younger, I'd watch politics and be like, these people are terrible. Like, how can we vote for these people? So I think that feeling has always been in play, although we've hit a real extreme after the debate last week. It was an ugly performance it was an ugly, disappointing, distressing performance by Joe Biden. This wasn't like a one-off because he is an elderly man. What do they do? We'll see. I don't know. And the line I came away with that was, and I don't know why we can't get someone else. Like, we can't rally up the votes for Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, or other names kicked around in a couple of months. If a guy who was on a reality show can make it to the Oval Office, maybe he changed everything. The paradigm was erased. Everything that we said couldn't happen, once he made it to office, you throw that playbook out. I saw some things today that saying they might be prepping Kamala Harris, who isn't really well liked, but maybe she would draw back some black voters and women voters that might have been leaving Biden. My line last week leaving that was, he can't win the election, but Trump can certainly lose it because of his erratic behavior and his inability to be restrained and disciplined, mostly when it comes to, I know he lied a lot last week, but I thought his demeanor was quite good, no worse than any other politician. I thought he was as cordial as he could be. He lost it as he got tired, like Biden did later on in the debate. It was 90 minutes for two old guys, for two elderly people. But as I read earlier this week, he was right back online saying dumb shit. So Biden can't win. I don't think he can. But Trump can certainly lose it with any of his wild, sad, distrustful behavior over the next 4 months.